Welcome to my thoughts on Umineko episode 2, Twin of the Golden Witch video, in which I will share my thoughts and theories about this episode. This video will be structured similarly to my thoughts on episode 1, where I will start with a recap and share my thoughts about the events that happened, after which I will go into some theories and overall thoughts on the story so far. I also have some thoughts to share about Bernkastel and no series, but since that would involve Higurashi spoilers, I will save that one until the end. I really thought that this video might be shorter than my thoughts on episode 1 video, since obviously episode 1 would deal with all the character introduction, setting introduction of the premise, but when I went through my videos in order to write my recap, I ended up with 14 pages, so strap in. This might become a long video after all. The episode begins with George and Shannon on a date at the aquarium, and they stand before the world's biggest fish tank. Shannon remarks how it's so big, it's almost like they sliced up a piece of the ocean and put it inside. Shannon's metaphor is really interesting, since it really shows how your worldview, your perspective basically, is formed dependent on your surroundings. Like for George, that fish tank is still a tank, but for the fish inside it might as well be the ocean. And it's the same for the servants on Rokonjima. For them, Rokonjima is basically their fishbowl, and they don't really know the world outside of it. In the same sense, when you think about it, it might as well apply to the witches playing this game, where Rokonjima is just their game board. On the beach, they talk about how they got together on this day. Shannon attributes this to magic and fate. Joyce disagrees, saying that it was an inevitable consequence. Shannon thinks back about the day where she decided to become human by smashing the mirror at the shrine, and the scenes that follows are miscellaneous scenes in the past that show how Shannon got to that decision. We see that although Jessica really ships Shannon and George together, and she tries to treat Shannon as an equal, Shannon feels that she isn't allowed to indulge in conversation with those two, since she is nothing more than a servant and not worthy into delving in the masters' lives. These scenes really show how big the gap is between servants and members of the Ushiromia family, how for Shannon, Joyce is unobtainable, and this fact is also rubbed in very cruelly by Ava, who butts in on the conversation, saying how George is to be in an arranged marriage since he will be successful in life, and as such Shannon can never get him. Now she finds Shannon with her head in the clouds, so she scolds her rather harshly, saying that furniture has no right to dream, and Canon comes to comfort Shannon, and Shannon just feels guilty since she wanted George to be the one to comfort her. In front of the portrait, Shannon wonders aloud why she is given a heart even though she's only furniture, and to her surprise, Beatrice responds that she can bring Shannon and George together, and the only thing she requests in return is for Shannon to break the vivid mirror at the shrine, since that mirror actually limits Beatrice's power. Shannon is a bit hesitant about it, and the more she hesitates, the more demeaning Beatrice's tone gets. Canon comes in, yelling not to bully Shannon, and now Beatrice's tone gets downright insulting, calling Canon furniture, before marking them both, remembering their encounter, and disappearing. Meanwhile, back in the present, Jessica and Shannon are talking about how the date went, and Jessica is visibly disappointed in Shannon's lack of progress, since they were supposed to get boyfriends at the same time, but only Shannon succeeded, to the frustration of Jessica, and Shannon isn't even acting on it in her eyes. Jessica fears that there may be something funny about how she looks or talks that is preventing her to get a boyfriend. Even though Shannon assures Jessica that's not the case. Shannon gets upset to the point of getting an asthma attack, and she sends Shannon away to resume her work afterwards in order to cry in her pillows alone. Shannon goes outside and meets Beatrice. Beatrice asks Shannon how her love life is doing, and Shannon is very grateful. They go to the beach and share some sweets that Shannon brought from Okinawa. And they talk about how Beatrice came to be on this island, how she was trapped by Kinzo. Beatrice mentions that only people with a certain wavelength are able to see her, and Shannon wants to return the magic brooch that Beatrice gave her, saying that since George and Shannon are together, at this point she doesn't need that brooch anymore. Beatrice says that Shannon can keep the brooch, it doesn't matter if she has it on her person or keep it in the box. It will work all the same. Shannon finds the two of them and is very distrustful of Beatrice, saying that Beatrice cannot be trusted since she isn't human, which sparks a discussion between Shannon and Canon about what it means to be human and if they are human or just furniture. Where the opinion clearly differs, Canon just sees what's right in front of him, a grey sky above the sea, while Shannon sees beyond that and sees a clear blue sky, which harkens back to the conversation about having different outlooks on life at the very first episode. Which harkens back to the discussion that Shannon and George had on their first date at the aquarium. How the worldview differs depending on your surroundings. Shannon gives the brooch to Canon, thinking that it might help Canon the same way it did her. Canon returns to the rose garden where he stumbles upon Kinzo, who's taking a stroll. Canon sees how Kinzo isn't able to see Beatrice, even though he is lamenting in the rose garden and Beatrice is just behind him. Culture festival time, and Jessica is very looking forward to it since it allows her to be herself and not be burdened by the strict restrictions at home. The only problem is Jessica said to her friends that she would bring a boyfriend, but she doesn't have one, so she asks Shannon about how to solve this. Shannon proposes Canon to act as a boyfriend, and Jessica blushes. She clearly has something for Canon. Canon accepts to pose as a boyfriend and they have a great time at school. In the evening, Jessica finds out that Canon posed as her boyfriend in the sense of duty as furniture. Canon is clearly conflicted since he has feelings for Jessica, but he is too restricted, seeing himself as furniture who is not allowed to love, and as such is not able to tell Jessica his true name, saying that he is just furniture and is not capable of loving her, which breaks Jessica's heart to the amusement of Beatrice. Beatrice shows her true colors to Canon, saying that she loves to bring people together, only to rip them apart. We cut to Rosa and Maria, who are taking the trip to Rokkenjima by train, seeing painfully how abusive and stern Rosa is towards Maria, rating Maria for taking candy from a stranger on the train, to the point where all the other passengers are awestruck at how Rosa is treating Maria. The scene between Krause and Ashley I find really adorable, since it shows their true selves, how they care about each other, when they don't have to put up a facade around others. But Krause is very vulnerable, saying that how he's failing at business and he has to deal with all the other siblings who are trying to get the inheritance away from him. And I think this is also the reason, because Krause is failing his business, why they are pushing Jessica so hard, because they want Jessica to succeed. The family arrives at the airport and George is in the bathroom practicing his proposal to Shannon, which is really cute. Jessica is taking a stroll just to clear her head and she comes across Kumasawa, where they talk about Beatrice. Kumasawa mentions Asian times, where Rokujima was called Akujikishima, also known as Evil Appetite Island. Kumasawa tells Jessica that evil spirits would settle down and eat the souls of people. And at the end of this episode we see how this is oddly accurate. Rudolph is seen in quite a bit of legal trouble, in which he tells Kyrie that everything will be fine, but we clearly see that he needs a lot of money to settle all of this. He also mentions that the ceremony is about to begin, but maybe it's close to a gamble, and what he says here is really interesting. How magic without a risk can never house a miracle, meaning if someone wants to succeed with magic, although magic seems really obviously fantastical and the go-to solution for all problems, you would need to have risk in order for magic to work. He also mentions that there is a special guest, in which Nancho thinks that he is referring to Battler, but obviously Ginzo is referring to Beatrice. All the game pieces are set and the game is about to begin. We have a small scene between Beatrice and Battler, where Beatrice is calling this torture, and in turn the torture that will continue until Battler surrenders, no matter how many times I have to replay this game. We arrive at the island and they talk in the Rose Garden about Halloween, which Maria is very excited for. She talks about how October is the right moment where the human world and the demon world are closest together. And interestingly enough, Halloween is called a harvest festival, which, considering how this episode ends, is both disturbing and fitting. Rosa abuses Maria again when Maria goes in her eyes too far about the festival of witches, which Rosa deems just a guest discussion and dismisses it. Rosa goes way too far, to the point of trampling Maria's candy. This rattles Rosa to the point that she can't keep up her facade and is visibly agitated in the parlor. She left Maria in Rose Garden even though the typhoon is almost here, and as the storm is starting, Rosa goes back and apologizes to Maria. Beatrice appears, shows off her candy rebrank magic and gives both Rosa and Maria an envelope, telling both of them not to open it before a certain time. Beatrice strolls into the mansion where she meets Kyrie. Beatrice is led by Genji to Ginzo's study where, funnily enough, Beatrice calls Ginzo a sad magician even though she burns her hands on the protective wards on the door. Canon brings lunch to Beatrice. And since Canon openly distrusts Beatrice, Beatrice takes this chance to taunt Canon some more, saying that she's planning to use Shannon as a second Twilight sacrifice, and all Canon has to do to prevent that from happening is to bow to Beatrice and kiss his shoes. And so Canon does just that, to protect Shannon. Meanwhile, Battler is bored since he has nothing to do yet, unlike the first episode where he was one of the main focus in the story. The adults are obviously quite startled about Beatrice's appearance since they were really scared that she's going to claim the inheritance and see her as a threat. Rosa is standing in front of Beatrice's portrait, asking Maria what she knows about Beatrice and if she's real. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Koda is quite upset about not being allowed to serve dinner to Beatrice, since he's not worthy to wear the one-winged eagle. He is very disrespectful and demeaning towards Shannon. Shannon overhears this and is quite angry, but Shannon tells him not to worry. Beatrice tries to provoke Shannon into surrendering like she did with Canon, but Shannon resists and refuses. Dinner is served to the family by Koda, but the family is so rattled that they start blatantly discussing the inheritance problem in front of the children. So they chase the children out of the room and send them back to the guest house, where they discuss the possibility of the mystery woman being the witch Beatrice. But since they can't prove that witches don't exist, it's the devil's proof, and Maria tells Battler not to worry, as Beatrice will surely show something impossible soon. George sneaks out to propose to Shannon, and obviously Shannon accepts and they promise each other to be together forever. Shannon returns to the mansion where she is, I would almost say, scolded by Canon, who is upset since he thinks that this can never end on a happy note, that they're not supposed to have these feelings as furniture, and that she's making a mistake, but Shannon obviously disagrees. And we have a weird scene in which I was very confused the first time, where all the adults are in the chapel, where they accept someone or something, and I think on rewatch that it's Beatrice who is showing them something impossible to prove to them that she's in fact a witch, and the one who has the right claim on the gold. The next morning, servants find a weird scribble on the chapel door, so they go to get Rosa, since none of the other adults can be found. On the door, there's also written in English, "Happy Halloween for Maria," which I think is a clear provocation from Beatrice to Rosa, since Rosa called Maria's talk about Halloween trash before. They enter the chapel, and to their horror they find the corpses of the other adults, their stomachs all ripped open and candy stuffed inside. Rosa orders Canon to go fetch Nanjo, and back in the mansion, Maria is crying about her letter that's missing. She wants it back since it's an invitation to the Golden Land. When Canon comes back, the kids obviously notice that something is wrong, so they follow them to the chapel, where they see the gruesome scene and are obviously heartbroken. Jessica is enraged and storms off to Beatrice's room, convinced that Beatrice is the one that's behind all this. But the only thing that she finds is a letter that is clearly mocking Jessica. Canon tries to comfort Jessica, trying to make up for the day that he broke her heart. But Jessica says that she wants to be alone. So in the hallway, Beatrice appears to Canon, where she gloats some more about how Canon broke Jessica's heart, which I think is a clear provocation to make sure that Canon goes back to Jessica in order to set up the second Twilight sacrifice. Canon dashes back to Jessica's room, where Jessica almost suffocates on golden butterflies. In the room, Beatrice summons her own demon furniture, which was a big surprise. I did not expect something like that to happen. But again, Maria did say that on Halloween, the veil between the human world and the demon world would be at its thinnest, so it makes sense. And surprisingly, Canon is able to duel against the demon servant and is able to win. And because of that win, Beatrice insults Canon some more, so that Jessica jumps to Canon's defense, in which they confirm that they care about each other, which fulfills the requirement for the second Twilight sacrifice. Beatrice summons new furniture, which are the stakes that we saw in the episode 1. The first one she summons results in Jessica staked in the back, although that one was meant for Canon, but Jessica protected him. Her sacrifice is unfortunately in vain, since Beatrice just summons another stake, who kills Canon after that by staking him in the chest. Beatrice mocks them some more as furniture and leaves, while both Jessica and Canon die together. We have a small scene with Kinzo, Shannon and Genji, where Kinzo decides to talk about his life and his first meeting with Beatrice, but unfortunately we cut away before we can hear any juicy details. Meanwhile in the chapel, the first closed room mystery is introduced, with the addition of red text, and everything spoken in red text is stated as a fact. And Battler handily deduces that although the key to the chapel was indeed in Maria's letter, someone could have snuck in, took out the key, commit the crime, put the key back, reseal the envelope and put it back in the handbag. So that's Battler's first small victory. There's also 3 gold bars presented on the table. I think it's another way to show off to the humans. like how Beatrice shows that she is indeed the one that owns the gold, but also it's almost symbolic that they finally got the gold they wanted, but they had to trade their lives in order to obtain it. Back in the parlor, Rosa is quite stressed out since, as the younger sibling, she was always picked on by the older siblings, but now that she's the only adult left, she has to take charge. The gold that was found on the table in the chapel is discussed, and Maria says something really interesting, how Beatrice actually never said that she wanted the gold. She was just asking if they were capable of solving the epitaph puzzle. Rosa gets the gun to protect everyone, and they notice that Jessica and Canon are missing. Because of the earlier mentioned wolves and sheep puzzle, the only moment where the sheep are really safe is when they're together and there are no wolves around. So Rosa orders everyone to go with her to Jessica's room, and she wants to keep the children inside at all times. They found the magic scribble on the door, which doesn't bode well, and indeed they find Jessica's body lying face down on the floor, but Cannon's corpse is suspiciously missing, which causes Rosa to jump to conclusions, saying that Cannon must be the culprit, and this doesn't sit well with the other servants. If they say that Cannon is not the culprit, that means that they fall under suspicion themselves, which causes Rosa to suspect every servant, and she grows more paranoid as a result. Rosa is really jumping to conclusions at this point, since she's even refusing to look at each servant personally. Like Shannon isn't the kind of person who would commit murder, for example. Since Rosa doesn't trust the servants anymore, they are all sent to the kitchen, while the rest of them go to the parlor. The servants in the kitchen hear a sound and find Cannon, who is wounded but seemingly alive. The servants bring Cannon to the servant room to treat his wounds, and Cannon manages to creep the servants out by reaching his hand into his wound without flinching, even though that wound is fatal and it shouldn't be possible. Cannon suddenly kills Tomasawa and Nanjo by slitting their throats, and before he can do the same to Shannon, they pin him to the wall, and his body dissolves into golden butterflies. And she goes to report to Rosa what happened, but when they return to the servant room, Nanjo's and Kumasawa's bodies have vanished, which causes Rosa to suspect the servants even more. Beatrice left a letter asking how the progress on the epitaph puzzle was going, and Butler tries to solve this third closed room mystery, but Beatrice shoots down every theory that Butler has to his frustration. Rosa's paranoia reaches its peak, and she calls everything a farce. She accuses the servants of being bought by the witch, shaming their honor, and trampling on their years of service. Kenji says that the master keys that they hold is a sign of trust, and since they're obviously not trusted anymore, he hands the master key back to Rosa, and all the other servants do the same. Rosa now holds all the master keys, and quickly going back to the whole wolf and sheep puzzle thing. All the sheep are being divided all the time, so it's easy picking for the wolf. Maria laughs, saying that keys are useless since Beatrice uses magic to gain access to rooms. Butler finally breaks down crying, saying that he's had enough and it's all the witch's fault, and searching for the culprit was just a waste of time. And they all hope that they will be able to trust each other again when the seagulls cry. Butler begs Beatrice to tell Rosa that there are only 5 master keys and not some duplicates that Rosa accuses that they are. But Beatrice's words cannot reach Rosa since Rosa doesn't believe in Beatrice. George is absolutely furious with Rosa about the treatment of the servants, so he decides to stay in the kitchen with the servants and Shannon. So in the parlor, it's only Butler, Maria and Rosa left. In the kitchen, Shannon says that she feels responsible for all of this since she was the one that broke the spirit mirror. George mentions that there is another spirit mirror in Nasi's possession, and I think that spirit mirror is the thing that Nasi wanted to give to Jessica in the first episode, when Jessica gave Nasi the bracelet, which admittedly saved Nasi's life from the Demon's Roulette. Butler and Maria discuss the epitaph and note that if Nanjo and Kumasawa count as a suitable sacrifice, he only needs 3 more sacrifices for the ritual to be complete. They note how magic is like gambling, like magic needs risk and weak points in order to work. I really like how magic has rules that way. Otherwise, magic would just be the go-to solution for everything. Beatrice knows in red that she keeps her promises, and that people will reach the Golden Land when they solve the puzzle on the epitaph. She says that since she is a witch and since she wants to use magic, she has rules that she needs to follow, which I have something that ties into my theory later on. Golda, George and Shannon went into the chapel to get Nasi's room key, but they were attacked by Beatrice's golden butterflies. They manage to narrowly escape and run into Nasi's room, but Golda can't lock the door since every time he tries, the door itself unlocks by itself. They are being chased by multiple goat-head demon servants, which 6 of them seems a bit excessive, so I think that spirit mirror in Nasi's room really does hold some power to limit Beatrice's powers. Another demon stake basically faces through the door and pierces Golda in the chest, killing him. Shannon creates a barrier, which is some very powerful magic I didn't expect, and she actually says to Beatrice that even in the final moments she pities Beatrice since Beatrice doesn't know what love is, and that Shannon has no regrets about her life and the choices she made, which causes Beatrice to absolutely lose her shit in a way I have never seen her lose her shit before. I also have some thoughts about that later. Beatrice is so rattled by that moment that she doesn't even allow George to mutter the words "I love you" to Shannon before killing both of them. Kenji knocks on the parlor door, saying that Masawa and Nanjo's bodies have been found in the courtyard. They note that because of the stakes in the particular body parts, these are the 7th and 8th Twilights, and they realize that if that's the case, there must be 3 other murders which they haven't stumbled upon yet. So they find Shannon, George and Golda all dead, being the 4th, 5th and 6th Twilight. At this point, Rosa mistrusts Genji, since he's the only one left, so Rosa thinks that Genji is actually the wolf, since Genji was alone but wasn't picked off, so he must be the culprit. They return to the parlor, where Battler finds a letter and opens it before showing it to Rosa, which causes Rosa to distrust Battler all of a sudden, saying that Battler is also in league with the culprits. And she turns on him. Maria starts to break down, saying that she doesn't want them to fight, and that's all the witch is doing. Meanwhile, Kinzo yearns for Beatrice, and he says that he made a mistake back then. He also wonders how far that person's roulette has been progressing, and since the 8th Twilight has passed, that means that the 9th Twilight is at hand, which causes the witch to revive and none to be left alive, which is basically game over. So Battler gets to the dining hall and gets drunk, since it's over anyway, and she brings him to Kinzo's study, where they meet with Beatrice, who will answer them all their questions. All she wants them to do is kneel before her, but we don't see Beatrice answering any questions. Instead we see the results screen, and after the results screen we witness Beatrice's total victory, Battler being humiliated in front of her as furniture, and goat demons from the demon world applauding to Beatrice. The door to the Golden Land opens, but instead of being rewarded, all the remaining surviving humans are being crushed and eaten by demons instead. Rosa breaks into the chapel, takes away a bar of gold, and runs away with Maria, being chased by goat-head demons. She's planning to run to the shore in order to swim away from this island, since this whole island is death. At some point, she notices that she's running with gold in one hand and her gun in the other, with Maria barely struggling to keep up. And she finally realizes, what the hell was I doing? And she tosses the gold and grabs Maria's hand, reconciles with her, and protects her until the end, redeeming herself at last. And so, the second episode ends rather emotionally. But this recap took me 3 days to make. I'm sure I missed some information, but I think that's the gist of it. Luckily, now that it's time for my thoughts and theories, I can just put an image here and be done with that. So this is just me talking about themes, characters, and my theories. First of all, themes for this episode. I think love is a very pronounced and important theme, where this episode really takes its time to show the relationship between George and Shannon, or Sayo, I should say, and the struggle between Jessica and Canon to connect, since Canon is so conflicted about his worldview that he is brought up to be furniture and nothing more than that. I think deep down Canon really wants to be human, but his worldview really restricts him in being furniture, which is a metaphor that is introduced at the first scene of the episode with the fish tank, that I really like. The third relationship between Rosa and Maria is a really disturbing one. Since in episode 1 we saw Rosa hit Maria once, but in that episode Maria was also portrayed as this weird creepy kid. So although I didn't like the fact that Rosa hit Maria that one time, Maria was being creepy, so I didn't really thought much about it. But this time it's really clear that Rosa has no patience with Maria at all. That she wants Maria to act grown up so bad that the moment Maria steps out of line, she gets smacked on the head. Not the face, but smacked on the head, so it doesn't leave a bruise, and that detail makes it very obvious that this abuse has been going on for a long time. And before I delve deeper into characters, I think it's interesting to see that the mention of sin is brought up by different characters, not only Beatrice and demons, but also Shannon, for example. I proposed a thought in my Thoughts on Episode 1 video that maybe if people were without sin, maybe that was the key to winning this. Anyway, it's just so interesting that the witch's dimension is called Purgatorio. The demons are obviously from hell. They are also summoned from hell when the door to the Golden Land opens, which sounds a bit like a contradiction, since at least the humans believe that the Golden Land is something that houses treasures that is a reward, so I'm not sure if the Golden Land itself is a trap or that something else is going on. Maybe they can only enter the Golden Land and get these rewards when everyone is free of sin. I really think it has something to do with sin, since hell is mentioned, purgatory is mentioned, which is really makes me think of Dante's Inferno, which I mentioned before. And that's all about circles of hell corresponding to a certain sin. Plus we have obviously the demon stakes, which all correspond to a certain sin. I think that really has to do something, that really has a connection between each other. Which, if that's the case, it's really difficult to get everyone to win, since the family members are coming here, basically trying to scam each other out of the inheritance so that they can take it. So in order to win, they would have to learn that in the end that isn't important. In the end, what's most important is family. I think that's the realization that Rosa got at the end too, where she threw away the gold bar in order to flee with Maria. They both, I don't think they got away, but at least she tried. I think of the questions I had for the first episode, the biggest one that was answered was whether there was magic involved, yes or no. I think I can answer this with a yes. I think it's quite clear that there is magic involved. It would be more questionable if Beatrice and her demon servants were the only ones that were wielding magic, but we have spirit mirrors that grant protection, utilized by Natsuhi. We have the servants from Kenzo who use magic to defend and attack. So magic, the occult, is used on both sides, which is really, really interesting. I didn't expect that, but it's really cool. Which leads me to, once again, the epitaph. My biggest lingering question, I mean, the other one that was answered is what happened to the people who survived to the end in the previous episode. It's now obvious that they were eaten by demons, so that's why only a piece of Maria's jaw was found at the end of episode 1. But that ceremony, or that resurrection ceremony, still feels like some kind of contradiction. I did say in my thoughts on episode 1 that whole epitaph just sounded too good to be true. I mean, sure, people had to be sacrificed, but if they did, they would get treasures and the witch would go to sleep for all time. So I'm still wondering, why did Beatrice want to go through with that resurrection ceremony if she was to be put to sleep directly afterwards for all time? That wouldn't make sense, since there wouldn't be anything to gain from it. For Beatrice, at least. And also this mention of the Golden Land. I don't know exactly what it is. I did notice that Ginzo servants know what it is, and when Connell mentioned it to Shannon, that the door to the Golden Land would soon be opened, they were shocked. They almost despaired. I think they knew the true meaning of that. Well, Maria and, to an extent, Battler and the others are more oblivious to its true nature. So, onto characters. I found it really interesting how Battler was prominent in episode 1 but barely prominent in this episode. And even if when he was on screen, he was barely doing anything. I can't really blame him, since he was confronted by one look-through mystery after another, which were impossible to solve, and I think that was the point. I think the true point of those closed room mysteries was that it was impossible to solve in order to let all the humans turn on each other, so that they could scatter and the wolves would pick them apart one by one, which is what happened in this episode. And as a result, we saw that Battler really got pushed to the brink of despair. I love the focus on Jessica in this episode. How clearly showed how restrictive and lonely her life is on Rokujima. How she feels like she is a fish in a fishbowl. and she cannot really interact with the outside world. Even when she feels she can be herself at school. I think she was kind of scared that Nancy would see Jessica performing and be scolded for it at home. She basically isn't allowed to have any fun by her parents. And that just shows that her cheery demeanor is really a facade, that she's really lonely and sad inside. And the only people she has to talk to are servants who are beneath her. Although she really wishes that Shannon was an equal, that's why she's trying to treat Shannon as an equal. Because she's the only friend of similar age that she has. As for the rest of the servants, I think it's now clear that every servant knows about the ceremony, about what happens at the end. But they cannot have an active role in it unless ordered. I liked how the rest of the adults were very quickly removed from play, which caused Rosa to assume control. And this is basically her arc, her story, her episode. Since it seems that she can't handle this pressure at all, the way she went about it is so different compared to Nasi in episode 1. Nasi was paranoid, yes, but Nasi was much more paranoid about there being a 90th person on the island and trying to protect the kids at all costs. Rosa, on the other hand, at the end was only concerned for herself. She only trusted herself. And that allowed Beatrice to win much more easily, since Rosa caused a big divide between everyone. Quickly going back to that whole theory about sin and how to win this game. It's interesting that we're introduced to the demon states as actual demons, and each demon corresponds with a specific sin. And it's interesting to see how the demon that killed Goda is actually described as being a gourmet herself, which corresponds with Goda's passion for food. Canon is again killed by the same demon, which stands for wrath, since he was always so very angry and aggressive. And Jessica was killed by the one that stands for lust, I believe. And I wouldn't say that Jessica was really lusting after Canon, but she was really pining for him, so it fits in sort of twisted way. I did say before that this episode felt like Rosa's episode, but to be honest, this is really Beatrice's episode, and it's the person I want to talk about most. He was really aggressive this episode, trying to make everyone surrender all at once, and it showed he really went all in. And I noticed a few things that I based my theory on, and I'll explain. Beatrice is the kind of person that is truly sadistic, that likes to toy with people, like to torment them. We've seen her torture Rosa in Purgatory just because Rosa was the one that didn't want to admit that Beatrice existed. And I think it's thanks to Rosa in this episode that Beatrice didn't win, since even Butler admitted to Beatrice at one point. Beatrice is the kind of person who likes to flaunt their superiority over humans, who looks down on humans. So I found it really interesting when Beatrice boasted that she could play this game forever until Butler would admit defeat, and Butler called that internal torture. But it would too be the same for Beatrice. And instead of sneering at Butler, she answered with perhaps, which I found almost uncharacteristically reserved for her. And that 1,000 years is a long time, which made me think Kinzo made a contract with Beatrice Beatrice did underestimate Kinzo at that point since she got trapped by his contract. And contracts are agreements between two parties. I think, in the end, that Beatrice at this point is also a victim of the demon roulette and not, in fact, in charge of it, although she would like to make humans believe that she is. I think she is trapped in the cycle that's been trapping the humans too, until one of them wins. If you assume that Beatrice is truly stuck in this game, and she would need a miracle to escape, that would mean that she would use something to create a risk in order for her magic to work, since we learned in this episode that magic needs risks and weaknesses in order to work, which is, I think, her gold, her fortune that she's taking. And there's also this mention of Kinzo's mistake being name dropped, and him lamenting his lost love. Kinzo is classified as a summoner powerful enough to have summoned Beatrice in the past. I do wonder what he had to sacrifice in order to summon her. We've seen before that in order to gain something, people would need to sacrifice something. I doubt that he would be able to summon Beatrice and get rich for free. That would be way too easy. I do not know what Kinzo and Beatrice agreed on when they made the contract. I do think it's not beneficial for Beatrice since she's trapped on this island. Maybe Beatrice was a person before and was sacrificed in order to make this contract happen, and as such disappeared from this world and is trying to get back. Maybe Beatrice was Kinzo's long lost love. But then again, at the end, it is said that Kinzo's lost love was resurrected and Beatrice went to sleep, so maybe Kinzo's long lost love that was sacrificed was Kinzo's first wife, which would create fuel for the gossip that after his first wife died, he could have an affair with Beatrice. I think this game, as established, is obviously a game between witches, between Beatrice and Bernkastel. But this episode made it clear that this game is, at least on the surface level, between Kinzo and his servants as chess pieces on one side, and Beatrice and her demons as chess pieces on the other. And the rest of the Ushiromia family are pieces that can be used by either side, so I think in that sense Battler can really make a difference. In that sense Battler is really a wild card, I think. I think that the treasures listed on the epitaph that would be granted, and the gauntlet would be almost being a good thing, is a trap to make humans focus on that part. Plus, like I said, those room mysteries are just to divert attention from the puzzle on the epitaph to finding a culprit, which is a very clever strategy of Beatrice to win and make people despair and surrender. Back to my theory, I think one of the clearest evidence that supports it is the fact that Kinzo said that that person ceremony has begun, which really makes it seem that Kinzo knows that it isn't Beatrice's ceremony. Otherwise he would have said Beatrice's ceremony has begun, or her ceremony has begun. But he said that person, so that would suggest that Kinzo knows who's really in charge of this whole demon roulette, who really is the key. And at this point I don't know who it is. I just think that Beatrice isn't in charge of the demon roulette. She just wants to make the people believe she is, so that she can use that to her advantage. But she's suffering all the same in the same cycle until either party wins. Even though this whole battle game, chess match, whatever you want to call it, was so incredibly one-sided since Beatrice was firing on all cylinders right from the start, it really shows her weakness as well, as Bernkastel pointed out, that sometimes Beatrice likes to torment people so much that instead of taking the opportunity to claim victory, she would take time to torment people, which allows people the chance to fight back, as we've seen with Battler. At one point, Battler was utterly crushed, admitted defeat, but in the end, he managed to crawl back up and find his resolve again to deny Beatrice. I think Beatrice's overconfidence is really key. I think that's a part that can be exploited in order to win. Make Beatrice believe that she has all the cards in her hand. I think that's the right moment to strike. One very interesting moment was the moment where Beatrice absolutely lost her composure, which I found, I won't say out of character, but very peculiar. Since, especially in this episode where Beatrice held all the cards, where she was so overpowered, where she was so confident that she was going to win, why would someone in that position lose their composure like that? Unless it was personal, unless she has been heartbroken or had a lost love in her history, that she was just utterly crushed. Maybe that's her motivation for bringing people together, just to see them ripped apart at the end, to share the pain. It's just the way she went about her tantrum. So incoherent, so vulgar. Like how George would just want Shannon for her flesh and nothing more. How love doesn't exist, how it's just lust. It's really as if Shannon struck a nerve at Beatrice. And all because Shannon, in the end, even though it resulted in her and George's death, she would never trade those days for anything in the world, and she would never regret any moment of it. And speaking of regret, regret seems to be a major theme as well. Seems almost like Beatrice has a goal to make people die with regrets. And maybe that's also key to winning, key to opposing Beatrice, to accept what you have, accept what you are, who you are, and not what is expected of you or what you can have, what you can obtain. So maybe in the end, all that's needed to do is try to get this whole family with different outlooks, with different perspective on life, trying to accept each other, try to each become selfless instead of wanting money, gold for themselves. Maybe that's the key. One last thing to note, that in episode 1, chessboard thinking was introduced as this great tool to help predict your opponent's moves, but here in this episode it's nerfed hard since it only seems to work against people whose moves you can actually predict. And since witches have a whole different set of morals and values, it's extremely hard, if not impossible, to predict, especially against a witch like Beatrice, who does not always make the best possible move. So there might be a lot of noise in between that, so chessboard thinking was really not that big of a help this time. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I wanted to talk about Bernkastel and who she might be, but that would involve Higurashi spoilers, so if you're not caught up on Higurashi, I would like to thank you for watching, and I would like to see you next time. Also maybe say hi on my Discord server, but this is your spoiler warning. The Bernkastel looks a lot, if not exactly the same as Rika from Higurashi. And in Higurashi, there's this 2-week time period which gets repeated over and over. But it is eventually discovered that it's not time being bound back, but instead Bernkastel talks about fragments. Or at that point in the game, we don't know it's Bernkastel. At the very last arc, you as a player have all these fragments that you need to line up in the correct order in order to get to the true ending. And I think that's Bernkastel that's overlooking the game instead of Rika. So, are they the same person? Bernkastel mentioned that she was human at some point, and that she was trapped in this game by Lambda Delta, which suggests that this was not a witch's game between her and Lambda Delta, but instead it was much more similar to her being Battler and Lambda Delta being Beatrice. But does that mean that there was an unknown witch sitting in the seat opposite of Lambda Delta who was helping Rika or Bernkastel? I don't know how Rika became Bernkastel, but I do know that Bernkastel has all the memories of every loop that she went through. She mentioned that she spent 100 years in that 2-week span, which is a lot of time. But at the end she made the miracle happen. Aside from having mentioned that she was human at some point, she also said that she used to say Nipa and me a lot, which are words that Rika used, and me is also a sound that she made that sounded a bit like a cat meowing, and since Bernkastel has a tail, that kind of fits too. To keep it short, I think that Bernkastel is in fact a culmination of all Rika's experience. Like when she goes to a new fragment, she inhabits that Rika's body in that world until she leaves. And then the process repeats again. It's similar to the battlers that we see in episode 2. There's that one battler just in the episode itself that's not aware of Beatrice and the challenge she has with Battler. And then we have the battler that actually talks to Beatrice outside of the game, that is actually aware of what happened in the first episode. So, if we compare those two, the battler in the episode is akin to Rika, and the battler outside of the episode is more akin to Bernkastel. It's interesting to see how all the 3 witches are complaining about boredom. So maybe becoming a witch is not something that is desired or voluntary in that matter. As to Lambda Delta's identity, I know she was named once after episode 1, about how she was the one that could end Beatrice's endless nature, and she looks a bit like young Takano from Higurashi, but I'm not sure if that's just a coincidence. Lambda Delta almost seems like Maria's role model for a witch. She even has the Halloween decorations. It's really interesting. I'm sure I'm forgetting things that I will remember later and regret not having put in the video, but as of now, this is all I have for today. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was quite a lot of work, but also a lot of fun to make, to share my theories and thoughts with you. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.